small cap stocks or even large caps, it's the same thing. Small caps are not a thing, right? So they're just companies that happen to be trading at a certain market cap. To me, when someone says that, like, that's a targeted statement. It's like, what do you actually mean? You're just buying companies based on their market cap? Like, that's not logical. What are you actually buying? You know, do you buy a company because it's a small cap, but it doesn't make any money? And then
US
I'll
small
just
cap ETFs. Hi, CapEx team. In the past letters and webinars, you mentioned that relative to US large cap indices like the S&P 500, US small caps have some value. For investors looking for exposure to this outside of the capital gains portfolio, are there any ETFs that you would recommend? And that is from Arjun.
I don't think there's, because what we were trying to say, okay, so we were trying to say that the value is more likely to be in the small cap area as opposed to large caps. We can't really think of any, there's no
I
broad.
think the comment I want to just make is that ETFs are not like a thing, right? So they're just a packaging of any number of equities in any number of sectors, okay? So, like, as we just mentioned, ETFs by themselves are not something where you go, oh yes, I like ETFs, or I don't like ETFs. They're very different. Well, they can be very different in liquidity, in makeup, and some of them have got futures contracts involved, some are just equities, some have got debt. Like, they're very, very different. So each individual one needs to be looked at in its own right as to whether it answers the question that we are trying to solve. With respect to small cap stocks or even large caps, it's the same thing. Small caps are not a thing, right? So they're just companies that happen to be trading at a certain market cap. Within those companies that are trading at a market cap, you can have completely shitty ones, you could have completely good ones, you can have some in tech sector, you can some have in oil and gas sector, you can some have in biotech. Like, they're across ranges. So the terminology small cap doesn't really mean anything other than the market cap size. So where someone says buy small caps, like, to me, when someone says that, like, that's somewhat of a retarded statement. It's like, what do you actually mean? You're just buying companies based on their market cap? Like, that's not logical. What are you actually buying? You know, do you buy a company because it's a small cap, but it doesn't make any money? Selling hemp to the vegans? Like, maybe, right? But we were very dedicated towards what we're trying to achieve. Within the CapEx portfolio, right, we're dedicated towards certain sectors, and we're dedicated to certain types of companies within those sectors. You know, if we're buying value stocks, then we'll look at value stocks, might be, and many instances are, small caps. But it's value stocks first, rather than saying, oh, we're buying small caps, if that makes sense. So I guess it's just the terminology. Try not to get too caught up in that terminology. It can be easy to get sort of distracted by financial lingo which gets used. And it's really just a matter of trying to understand, what does that actually mean? None of this stuff is actually that complex if you break it down and say, okay, what is it?
You're right, Chris. A lot of the speakers just for strategists and people talking on CNBC to try and sound smart. And the other one, of course, would be emerging markets. Oh, we see great value in emerging markets. Like, well,
what does that mean?
hey, China is very, very different than Argentina, and very different like in South Africa. So
Uganda's emerging market, but we're not buying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So look, we always like to try and give people something to look at. So here's something to play around with, folks. Have a look at it. So it's a US small cap ETF. It is the small cap energy sector. And you can see there, so about 50% is oil and gas producers. What's that? About 30% would be oil and gas service stocks, chucking a few coal stocks and whatever else, a few shipping stocks, whatever. There we go. That's a nice, interesting ETF with a nice little trading range there. I think if we go to the next slide, this will give you, okay, so we're done here. So yeah, okay, so this is that ETF. So small cap oil and gas, or the small cap energy sector. Just to give you an idea of how unloved this sector is. So we're comparing the small cap energy sector versus the small cap sector, small cap index. So S&P 600 small cap index. And you can see there, that's indexed to 100 to 1. So in the last 10 years, down by about 90% compared to small caps. That's the green line. just unloved, unwanted, just toxic waste. No one wants to touch this stuff. And then I think the next slide is we compare small cap energy to large cap energy, and that's still down 80%. So that gives you an idea of sort of where the value is likely to be, and hence the sort of, well, where we find ourselves focusing on, because that's where the value is. But hey, look, folks, if you just said, you know what, yeah, great, I just can't be bothered stock picking, here's one ETF here that would probably encompass a lot of the stuff we're talking about in energy. That's not part of the CapEx portfolio, but hey, there's lots of different ways of slicing and dicing to capture, the themes. And for, different investors have different risk profiles and tolerances. So